Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Catholic Re.Con Testimonies from Reverts and Converts. I'm your host, Eddie Trask. Before we get to this week's guest in this fancy studio here, I just want to remind you to subscribe, remind you to check out eddietrask.com so you can learn about what I'm trying to do in my ministry. And also, if you know of anyone that would love to share their Catholic testimony, please send them my way. This week's guest is Brian Howell. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Eddie. I appreciate the invitation.
It is my absolute pleasure.
Eddie's been on my show many, many times,
That's
so
right.
It's only fair that I be on Eddie's.
That's right. So I've been on the radio with Brian a few times here at Salt and Light Radio, and we've been planning this for
months.
4 months maybe, but he was waiting for this perfect studio to come together and now wants to share his testimony. So I got to say, Brian is a gem of a person.
You don't know me very well.
I do. I know you very well. And I'm just privileged to be able to do a number of radio spots with him, and I look forward to hearing your testimony.
Well, I grew up in a small town in north central Montana with Glacier National Park in my backyard, but there was like maybe 3,200 people. There was over 300 people in our entire high school. That's how small this town is. And being the firstborn of the firstborn, I grew up with my grandparents, knowing my great-grandparents. Both sets of grandparents lived there in my hometown, so I got to spend a lot of quality time with them growing up. Didn't have any sort of religious background per se. My parents kind of dipped their toe in the organized religion water a few times, and my dad kind of felt like it was full of hypocrites and didn't want anything to do with it. So it really wasn't until I think my 8th grade year that I was even taken to church. My best friend at the time, if I spent the night at his house on Saturday night, his parents always made it clear to me that you will go to church with us on Sunday. And so I went to the Presbyterian church, grew up there as a Protestant, about 10 years. That's all I knew was the Presbyterian church. My first wife, she lived here in Boise, and that was the reason that I came to Boise in the first place. And I've lived here now over 30 years. And I've been in radio since I was 16 years old. But my station there in my hometown, even though it was only 3,200 people, somehow we had an FM station, and that's where I started. I went from flipping burgers to flipping records back in 1984, but it literally blew off the air. We had 98-mile-an-hour winds that just ravaged our poor town, and it did so much damage to the radio antenna that the owners didn't want to put any more money into it, and so it went dark. But a friend from college had called me, and he had moved to Boise, and he said, there are so many radio stations down here. You know, you should move here. And now that the girl that I'm pursuing is from Boise, and he says there's lots of job opportunities to get back into radio, I jumped at the chance and moved down here, worked at a variety of different radio stations, classic rock, oldies, country, you name it. I've worked every shift known to man in radio. I did some sports, some talk radio, so it's been pretty fulfilling. Never got rich, but, you know, if you do what you love doing, you never really work a day in your life. But it's funny as I look back, I had a lot of opportunities to be Catholic, but I never had that invitation extended to me. I dated a girl in the late 80s. Her family was Catholic, and of course, me being Protestant, there was always that clash of cultures there. But never once did they invite me to go to Mass. Our next door neighbors, they were an elderly couple, and I would mow their lawn and shovel their walk. When they each passed away, because they meant so much to me, I went to their funeral, Catholic funeral. And I left that Mass actually angry, because in the Catholic faith, a funeral is sort of this celebration of life. Everybody's happy. Everybody's remembering how special these people were. And to me, I just suffered a loss.
Yep.
I'm sad. And so it's like, what are you people doing? So, my first few experiences with the Catholic faith were sort of negative. I dated a girl in college that was Catholic, never invited me to Mass.
Wow.
My best friend of 30 years, I spoke at their wedding and, but never once did they ever invite me to Mass. Then I find out from my Italian grandfather towards the end of his life that his dad actually came over from Eastern Italy in like 1902. Of course, being Italian,
Yep.
we're Catholic, but somehow over the generations, we lost the faith. I think my grandfather, again, there was some misinterpretation, perhaps. He was angry at the wrong thing. He felt that certain families in the church maybe had, maybe they were looked upon with a little greater favor than his family.
Sure.
The confessionals changed. He never wanted to drink out of the cup because he thought he was going to catch some kind of disease. He was funny. He was like my favorite wind-up toy. Whether it was politics or church or whatever, I would just throw out a topic and just sit back and wait, to watch him go through his little fit. I'm not drinking out of that cup, cripes. All the diseases that are out there, right? He was just a riot. I really miss him. It's been 7 years ago since he passed away. World War II veteran and just absolute hero. I really, not a day goes by that I don't think about him. But it's just looking back, it's like I could have been Catholic so much sooner.
Sure.
Had somebody just made that invitation. And
why do you think that is?
That I don't know. Maybe I put off some kind of a vibe being a Protestant that I was so anti-Catholic. I don't remember ever being that way.
Sure.
I don't think I ever demonized the Catholic Church in any way. And if I did, it was just out of ignorance, not knowing what it was all about. And maybe those people, because we lived in a small town, maybe they didn't know enough about their faith. It's hard to say, but I think if the invitation had been made sooner, because in the Protestant church, we didn't have the Eucharist, obviously. We had the Lord's Supper.
Yeah.
So the last Sunday of every month, we would get an oyster cracker and a shot of grape juice. It was a symbol, It didn't have the same meaning. Full disclosure, I suffer from a bipolar disorder, which cost me my first marriage. And it took me about a year to recover from that and to heal. And my current wife, we met in an odd way. At the time, she worked for the Idaho Lottery, and I worked for a country station. And the lottery was about to celebrate their 10th anniversary. Huge event at Boise Town Square Mall. And I wasn't the first choice to come MC the event, but it ended up falling into my lap. And I met her, and it was like head over heels as soon as I saw her. So after the event's over, I hang around because I want to get her phone number. She thinks I'm hanging around to get my talent check. So she's like, your check will be mailed to you.
Why are you just standing
here?
Why
are you stalking me? Yeah. You're sort of a creep. So that was July, and because our schedules were just so busy, we didn't even get our first date until October. And to spend more time with her, because our schedules were so wacky back then, I went to Mass with her and her parents just to spend more time with her. And I think she was a little apprehensive, again, about inviting me to Mass because she knew my background. Besides being Protestant, I dabbled a little bit in the evangelical movement in the mid-90s until that got way too weird and I just quit going to church. But after that first Mass, we walked out and she's kind of, what did you think? It's like, it really isn't that different than what I grew up with. It felt very comfortable, very similar.
Yeah.
Except the Eucharist. It's like, what is so special about this wafer that the priest is waving around? So I had to learn more, and as our relationship progressed and I knew that I wanted to marry her, I knew that I was going to have to become Catholic, and I wanted to become Catholic. So that 9-month process of RCIA, at the time, and I don't know, I joke and I shouldn't, but my RCIA program may as well have been written in crayon. It just was not that fulfilling. And I left, and maybe many people new to the church do that. you leave with more questions
Sure.
than when you went in. And in all fairness, it's hard to pack 2,000 years of church teaching and doctrine into a 9-month class. I get that now. But, coming out of it, and we went to Mass, and eventually we had 2 kids of our own, and of course we raised them up in the Catholic faith as well. But I was very frustrated with my job at the time, and I was griping one Sunday afternoon. We had just gotten back from Mass, and my wife Becky, she's going through the church bulletin, and says, Salt and Light Radio's looking for an operations manager. Maybe you can quit griping about your current job and go get a new one. So 9 years ago, they took a chance on me, and I've learned more about my Catholic faith working here than I did, the previous 20 of being a Catholic convert. So obviously, big believer in Catholic media and just being able to learn more and go deeper into the Catholic faith by working here. But yeah, just looking back, college, of course, I think most guys can probably think back to their college days, and it was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And I hit rock bottom early, and I thank God for that I found Jesus at about 21 years of age. And
what was that like? You remember
it was
vividly?
Very powerful. My dad was a long-haul truck driver, and so my dad didn't have much of an impact on my childhood, and I had to replace that father figure in my life with other people. And luckily, they were religious people. It was my youth group leader. It was my best friend's dad. And so that's kind of where I had my taste of religion. And so it was at my youth group leader. Later, it became an adult Bible study. So we were going through the book of Romans, and Bible study had ended, and people dispersed, and it was just me and this other gal that were left. And I don't even know how he even broached the subject, but I was just so overwhelmed with this emotion of letting Christ take a hold of my life, of giving my life to Jesus. I have never cried that hard in my entire life. Just sit there on his couch, and just the release, the guilt went away of all the things that I had done in my life up to that point. And it was just so powerful. But what had happened at that point then is you swing 180 degrees the other way and become a zealot and completely run away all your friends and family who don't want to talk to you anymore. It's like kind of hard to evangelize when you're a party of one. But eventually I kind of found center, and it's been great, whether it was Protestant, evangelical, and now Catholic. My life for most of my life has been all about Christ, trying to live that life. Of course, I fall short on a daily basis, but just to try to reflect that to other people so that they can look at me and it's like, I want what that guy has.
Yeah.
And again, I fall short on a daily basis, but I do my best to just wanting to be the best Christian I can, be the best husband, the best father, and the best operations manager that I can be here at Salt and Light.
So this has been like a continuation of RCIA, like you were saying,
right.
being here.
2.0.
2.0, exactly. No longer in crayon. You're using pens. You're using pens.
We graduated from colored pencils.
That's good. That's good. So what specifically, are there certain segments that have just been helpful? What is it that is really allowing you to immerse into the faith?
I think Dr. Ray early with his parenting advice definitely helped me with, my now 18-year-old daughter who's going off to college next month.
Wow.
My 15-year-old son. When they were younger, 8-9 years ago, and I was first working here, and trying to get some tips on how to be a better parent.
Sure.
And then, of course, later with the apologetic shows, just learning things. The first time I ever heard, when Jesus walked the earth, he established a church, and that church is the Catholic Church. The first time I ever heard that in my life was on Salt and Light Radio.
No kidding.
Nobody had ever bothered to tell
Say
me
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not exactly in the evangelical propaganda do they want to let you know that,
Yeah.
hey, the Catholic
Yeah.
Church is the original.
Yeah.
They want to beat you over the head with that Bible, but they fail to mention that the Bible is a product of the Catholic Church. So things like that, receiving the Eucharist unworthily, and the detriment that can be. Never thought about it, was never taught, didn't know. So there's just a lot of aspects about the church. And because the Eucharist brought me into the Catholic faith, learning more about what that is, what the real presence really means, what the source and summit of our faith really is.
And the gravity of all of this, just takes it a few notches up. I mean, I think that for my own journey, everything was so superficial for so long.
Mm-hmm.
For so long. And then you realize, okay, you can't just go down one level. There are infinite levels. You can't live long enough to understand just how rich the faith is. And I think that something that Catholics can do in their relationship with Protestants is not just address, hey, I've got an answer for your question about this doctrine, but to witness to how deep the faith is or how rich the faith is, because it's the big leagues. It really is. It's the big leagues. I mean, that's still an understatement. But if they can see some of the rich tradition, not through the lens of traditional anti-Catholicism, but maybe you can bring them to the modern day and hopefully just share the gospel through your life, which I think we could all continue to work on, clearly.
And we do pledge drives twice a year, and over the years I have interviewed dozens of people, and because I come from a non-Catholic background, and hey, I had hurdles and stumbling blocks coming into the faith. I didn't understand Mary. I didn't understand the saints. I still have problems with confession.
Sure.
So you have these things, these issues and hang-ups when you come into the faith, and that's fine. And listening to Catholic radio has definitely helped work some of those things out. But if there's somebody out there that has those same hang-ups, and I always ask those questions of people that I know are converts when we're having that interview process. It's like, well, what was it like for you?
Yeah.
Because I know what it was like for me, but what was your experience?
Yeah.
And some of them are similar to mine. Every once in a while, I'll hear something new. It's like, wow, I never thought about that.
Mm-hmm.
But to get other converts' perspective of what their hang-ups were, what brought them into the church, what did they enjoy most about being Catholic, especially our spring pledge drive, because we kind of try to schedule it around Easter, so we have all these fresh, shiny new Catholics to share their stories.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful to hear people, how they find their way back home to the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And
some people, I think, given the people that I've interviewed, they will find certain pillars that once that pillar falls, everything else lines up. And then the other people say, well, it's not really a pillar. There are like thousands of stakes in the ground, and I need to pluck one out at a time. So they get caught up with understanding each doctrine. And there's nothing wrong with that. But those are two distinct journeys, I think, or categories of journey that, some people, it may take them 5 to 10 years to commit or to say, finally, I'm going to join RCIA. And even then, they come in that phase of inquiry. They still have the questions. I wonder how this priest is going to respond to this, or this RCIA coordinator is going to respond to this. Because if they give me a different answer than what this person said, I'm going to have some issue. Yeah. So I don't know if you've seen stuff like that as well.
Yeah. Thinking back to the service aspect of the church, too, one of my first experiences when I was attending Mass with my then girlfriend, now wife, the Knights of Columbus pancake breakfast. And I know the Knights hate this, that they're so, that they're branded.
I was going to say synonymous with the pancake breakfast.
But it was that again was another stepping stone towards me wanting to become Catholic, because I had belonged to different civic organizations over the years that gave back to the community, and I always enjoyed doing that.
Yeah.
And so to be able to do that within a church environment through the Knights of Columbus, I thought, wow, I want to be one of those guys. I want to serve orange juice and flip pancakes and just be present to people after Mass in that kind of setting. So so there's a lot of great things about being Catholic, whether it's the pro-life issues or wanting to give back to your community, the works of mercy.
Yeah.
It's great. The last 20 years have just been the most fulfilling, and definitely the last 9 years working here at Salt and Light. I mean, like I said, I'd been in radio since 1984.
Yeah.
And the last 9 years that I've been here at Salt and Light have been the most fulfilling of my broadcast career. I've played music, I've met superstars in rock and country, but it just pales in comparison to be able to have a deep conversation with a priest in our diocese, or seeing the light in these seminarians' eyes where they can't wait to become a priest. And the religious sisters that we've met over the years, it's so much more fulfilling than meeting a movie star or a rock and roll artist.
Wow.
So it's nice to have priests and deacons on speed dial.
Great point.
Yeah.
Great point. Back to your point about never being invited
Yes.
to the church. How do you view that now? If there are other Brians out there, do you view it as something where you just say, come to Mass with me? Or or if you don't, what is the approach?
That's a good question, and I'm still trying to figure that out as well. With my first wife, we had twin boys, and they're 29 this summer. One I would consider an agnostic. One goes to Calvary Chapel, but at least he's Christian and has some sort of religion in his life. Now, the boys, even though I was divorced from their mother and we had them on the weekends, we took them to Mass. I was very impressed that at age 12, they had the creed memorized.
Yeah.
I was pretty impressed. Maybe I got 2 more that I can bring into the church, but Mass every other weekend just wasn't enough to make it stick, I guess. But yeah, it's hard to have that naturally come up into a conversation. Hey, what are you doing Sunday morning?
Yeah.
Why don't you come to Mass with us?
Yeah.
We've had relatives and friends stay with us, and it's just one of those things that, you can stay with us, but just know that Saturday night we go to Mass, or Sunday morning we get up early and we go to Mass. It's just, if you want to stay here, that's great. Just know we're going to Mass. And it goes back to my best friend's dad. You can spend the night here Saturday, but know that Sunday you're going to church with us.
Yeah.
And it could just be something that simple. But sometimes it's hard to naturally work in that invitation.
Well, I think comparing it was when I was at the non-denominational church, that was a big push. Okay, who are you going to invite? 2 big moments, Christmas, Easter.
Yeah.
If you are fearful, you don't want to do it, you're introverted, those are your opportunities. Here, invite people. It was even difficult then. It's just that action of saying, I'm going to open myself up for rejection. I think people deal with that no, I'm not going to go to your church. But in the Protestant realm, the hurdles seemed lower.
Right.
You're not thinking about how are they going to respond to kneeling at this point, or what they should say in response to the priest. So I've noticed that there's a lot of insecurity in asking that question because you might be concerned about how someone is going to view the Mass.
Right.
And they may be freaked out. They're going to never come back. Well, I think that takes the Holy Spirit out of the equation and just puts us in our own will. And we assume that could be a massive seed that's planted, even if they don't understand, even if they look at the statues and say, what's that about? Why the candles? Even if they assume that they know what's happening. I think that I just love what you said earlier. We need to get better at that invitation and let the Lord, especially if we feel prompted. That's another thing. Yeah. I should ask him. No,
Yeah.
a little too scared.
You let that opportunity slide.
Yeah.
It was much easier when I was a Presbyterian getting my mom to go to church with me every once in a while. I knew my dad was a lost cause. He made that painfully obvious. But I got my mom to go to Sunday service with me a few times, and we'd have to sit in the back because she didn't want anybody, I guess, to see her there. I don't know. But she got a lot out of it. And again, I thought, that might stick.
Yeah.
She would continue to go to church even after I'd moved to Boise. But no, it's something has to speak to you. Again, over the years, interviewing some of the young people we have here on the radio, there's education and evangelization. And it's one thing to have the book knowledge and to memorize the Bible or the catechism from start to finish. But until you have that encounter with Christ, it doesn't make sense. The longest distance is from here to here, from the head to the heart. And once you've bridged that gap and it actually has meaning and you start living it, not just knowing it, but living it, that makes all the difference in the world.
Well, I think we kind of touched on it this morning during Man Cave hour or half hour or 15 minutes. I don't know.
It goes by so fast.
Yeah, which is the detachment from earthly things. The person that simply has the head knowledge of that is not going to just say, okay, it sounds right, I'm going to do it. That seems to be more towards your own strength versus down to the heart. I'm moved to detach from these things because I can see how it brings me closer to Jesus.
And you're not going to bring anybody into the Catholic Church beating them over the head with a catechism. We have to love people into the church. Do we accept all behaviors? No. I mean, are we able to judge? Yes. Can we condemn? No.
Yep.
We always say here at Salt and Light, we're in the seed planting business.
Yeah.
Harvest, that's upper management. We don't deal with that so much. We just want to plant those seeds.
That's good.
And depending on what kind of soil those seeds are planted, sometimes they come to fruition and people join the church. I think of a gentleman down in Magic Valley by the name of John Martin. He was a Mormon. And he was going back and forth between Twin Falls and Boise, and he happened to stumble across our morning show. And because of what he heard that particular morning, made him listen to other shows on Salt and Light, made him more curious about the Catholic faith, and he went through RCIA and is now a member of St. Edward's Parish in Twin Falls.
Wow.
And that's the power of Catholic radio. And oftentimes we're not going to know this side of the veil how many people that we've touched with the message. And again, that's not my job.
Yeah.
My job is to just get the gospel out there, the truth of the Catholic Church, the good news of our Lord Jesus Christ. And from there, it's up to that individual person to make that choice.
Absolutely.
But again, it's so edifying when we hear stories. And the Idaho Catholic Register has printed some of those stories over the years. They love to put conversion stories or reversion stories in the paper. And for a while there, a lot of them had some sort of mention that it was something they heard on Salt and Light Radio that triggered them to either investigate the church or make that decision to come back to the church. And that's why we're here. And that's why you're here with this incredible YouTube channel. I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to go back and see some of Eddie's earlier interviews and some of the people that you've had the privilege to interview. Just the powerful stories that people have. And that is the one thing I think when you do evangelize to people, everyone has a story. And you should be prepared to give that testimony because nobody can refute your story. It's your story. Someone might come at you about, well, why do Catholics do this or that? And you may or may not have the answer to that, but nobody can argue with your story.
Great point. So, when you talk about the defense of the faith, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are an apologist. That could mean that you're able to articulate your story and how the Lord changed your life, and that in those words you could be defending everything. You could be condensing the whole thing into a testimony, and that's what I believe happens a lot with these stories. If someone just has this radical encounter with God, no, it doesn't just happen. That was the other thing. There are a lot of Protestant testimonies, a lot. There hasn't been enough focus on Catholics being able to step out and talk about how they were changed and how they investigated church history and get into that level of detail. So, yeah, I just love that we have this opportunity to do it. And to your point about the radio, there was a gentleman that was on, I don't know, episode 10 or something. He was completely changed because of listening to a morning show in Washington. And he ended up listening to it on his morning commute.
Yep.
And over time, it was seed, 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 seed. You get to a point where, okay, now I need to, whatever. If he's just receiving information, I'm going to go out and research what they're saying to see if it checks out. Once it checks out, I can't resist anymore. So,
and I think most people have heard Dr. Scott Hahn's story.
Sure.
Dr. David Anders shares his story on his show. These are people that were very anti-Catholic, and they set out to bring down the Catholic Church and ended up studying their way, reading their way into the Catholic faith.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I dare you.
No, to listen to their stories.
Yeah.
And someone was saying this the other day. There's nothing. It's not like there's a new argument. Like, oh, I've got it now.
Yeah.
I'm going to take them down. It's to have the humility to maybe go and listen to some of their struggles and see if there's a parallel to your struggles, and be open to the Holy Spirit's prompting. Because my prayer is the people that find this channel a lot of them are looking for it,
right?
But a lot of them may not realize that that's what they're looking for, and they just stumble upon it, and maybe we'll listen to 15 minutes of someone's story. So,
being the father of 4, and as much as I love my kids, it was coming to that conclusion that no matter how much I love my children, that pales in comparison to how much my Heavenly Father loves me. That became obvious at one of these Catholic men's conferences, and I think Father Larry Richards said it, and it rolled around in my head that entire day, and when I got home that night, I just broke down. When you come to that realization is how loved you are.
Yeah.
And it's convicting sometimes, because it's like, am I really living up to that title of beloved child of God?
Sure. Yeah.
My relationship with my parents is not the best. So to be able to have my Heavenly Father, to have Jesus as a brother, to have our Blessed Mother sort of fill that role in my life right now, it's been great to have, I guess, that holy proxy, for lack of a better term.
No, I get it. And that's why a lot of people struggle with Mother Mary, with God. They struggle because they may have wounds on this earth, and they associate them with the wounds.
Right.
How can I overcome such a thing, or how can I accept that love? That's the big thing as well. So anything you want to add? If there anything about Salt and Light, any programs that are coming up, anything you want to share?
I would just encourage Catholic men. It's the last Saturday of every January. We have our Catholic Men's Conference. Ladies, we have a women's conference, usually in September or October. So I would always point people to go to saltandlightradio.com, and all the information and registrations usually posted there.
Virtual as well, because this reaches a lot of different states.
I'm not sure if it's going to have that virtual feel in the future. I know last year we kind of had to because of the pandemic, but I think we really love to have butts in the seats, as they say, because first of all, these things are expensive to put on, and we have to try to recoup some of those expenses. But on the same hand, I think there's just something that you get from being there in person. This past men's conference, I watched it from home. I didn't get to participate. I watched you share your story, and that was very powerful, and to see Father Larry and Dr. Ray. But I just felt like I was missing something. I felt the whole day that I should be there. I should be there. So I don't plan on missing any more in the future. But they're very powerful, and I would just encourage, if you have an opportunity to either go to one of our conferences or a retreat of any nature, that you can just glean so much out of that time, that one day or that one weekend, to draw you closer to God.
Excellent. Excellent. One thing I thought of, speaking of men's conferences, there's a platform. It's fairly new. It's heroicmen.com. Think of Formed, if you're familiar with Formed, but specifically for men. So if you're leading a men's group, if you are part of a men's group, you can go to heroicmen.com, pick up various curricula to help guide your study. And so it's just an easy thing to do rather than have to come up with an 8-week schedule, for example. So I wanted to mention that. There is a big push in the church right now to get men out of isolation, coming off of or out of the pandemic. It's important to find groups. It's important to go to conferences. It's important to not get into a place where you say no one cares, because I know a lot of men that do care, and brothers that would love to see you and help you get back on your feet. So I just wanted to mention that. Brian, thank you.
Thank you, my friend. God
Pleasure.
bless you in your ministry.
Thank you so much. Until next time, take care and God bless.